You stand barefoot on cold stone in a Spartan courtyard. The city above you is silent, too silent. 3 days ago, your house burned to its foundations. Your children are already gone. The march ended before dawn. The shouting faded hours ago. What remains is worse. 30 women stand beside you in rigid lines. No chains, no visible guards. Just distance measured precisely, bodies counted without ceremony. A man approaches from the far end of the courtyard. He offers no name. He does not need to. The crimson cloak draped over his shoulders declares authority more clearly than any introduction. When he speaks, his voice is flat and controlled, his Greek clipped, sharpened to remove excess. You are no longer Athenians, he says. You are no longer wives. What you are has ended. Each sentence lands cleanly, without anger, without emphasis, like a strike designed to leave no mark on the skin. Helene does not move. She learned quickly that movement draws notice. In Sparta, attention is never a gift. They now belong to the state, not as common slaves. Slaves labor with their hands. They will serve in other ways. He speaks of allocation, of civic necessity, of purpose. His language is bureaucratic, nearly detached, as if he were listing supplies rather than describing the dismantling of lives. And Helene understands something crucial. The true terror is not immediate violence. It is the system that replaces it, a structure that functions without hatred, without pleasure. Anger is unnecessary. Records suffice. Order suffice. Decisions made far from the faces that endure them suffice. Sparta does not rage. Sparta categorizes. The man turns and leaves without waiting for acknowledgement. The silence thickens, pressing inward. Spartan women step forward and begin separating the captives with quiet efficiency. Helene feels herself crossing an unseen boundary, not into chaos, but into something far colder, a mechanism that already knows her purpose. No voices rise. They do not need to. Gestures are brief, exact, practiced. The women are divided into equal groups, 8 at a time, and guided toward different stone buildings bordering the courtyard. Helene walks with her gaze lowered, counting steps, forcing her thoughts into order. In Sparta, she senses, thought itself is a dangerous indulgence. The building she enters is stark. Bare stone, no decoration, no symbols. Inside, the air is cool and smells faintly of water. There are no restraints. No cries. That absence unsettles her more than either would have. A woman waits beside a stone table and a shallow vessel. Her face shows neither interest nor disdain, only function. When she speaks, her voice is neutral, worn smooth by repetition. Helene understands before being told. She must comply before instruction is given. She has already seen how this place works. Resistance does not stop the process. It merely delays it and sharpens the consequences. She answers each question steadily, as if every response purchases a few more seconds of control. The woman inscribes symbols into a wax tablet. No explanation is offered. None is required. In Sparta, knowledge belongs to those who command. When it is finished, Helene is led into a shared room. Other women sit in silence. Some stare at the floor. Others examine the walls, as though searching for fractures that do not exist. No one speaks. Silence becomes a shared discipline, a shield. That night, food and water are delivered. Enough, precisely measured. Helene notes the calculation and understands another truth about the system enclosing her. This is not careless cruelty. It is selective preservation. What is useful is maintained. Everything else is discarded. Sparta wastes nothing. Now she is counted among the resources. As she lies awake on the hard pallet, memory intrudes without permission, smoke clinging to her hair, ash still coating her tongue, as though the fire followed her here. 72 hours ago, she was the wife of Nicandros, an Athenian commander at Dylon, mistress of an ordered household. mother of two children who now exist only as absence. That life feels unreal, as though it belonged to another woman. Here, her name carries little weight. What matters is what she signifies, what she can provide, what can be extracted. She remembers the stories Athens told about Sparta, tales exaggerated to make the enemy comprehensible. They no longer feel exaggerated, not because everything here is violent, but because everything is inevitable. Every step was decided before she ever arrived. In the quiet, Helene realizes she has entered a city that does not improvise fates. At dawn, she wakes before being summoned. She has not truly slept. Her body remained rigid, alert, as if it learned in a single night that rest itself is a risk. Light enters through a narrow slit high in the wall. It offers no view beyond. Sparta offers no views, only purposes. The women are escorted out once more, taken individually into chambers identical to those used the previous night. In Selene's room there is a stone slab, a bowl of clear water, a short bench carved directly from the wall. The older attendant returns, now accompanied by a younger woman. There is no urgency. There is no hesitation. Each action unfolds with the steady certainty of a procedure performed for generations. Whatever follows has already been determined. The questioning resumes. It is not curious. It is procedural. Information is gathered. Cycles are logged. Personal histories are flattened into marks on wax. Selene responds without resistance. She understands now that here neither agreement nor defiance is required, only compliance. When the tablet fills with symbols once again, Selene senses that something irrevocable has occurred. She cannot yet define it, but she knows this much. She has not been evaluated as a person. She has not been sentenced. She has been categorized. As she is guided from the room, muted sounds drift through the stone from other chambers. No voices, no words, only controlled emotion held just below the surface. Sparta does not need raised voices to impose its will. Power here operates through anticipation. Each woman imagines what may come, and that imagined future disciplines her more effectively than any threat. Back in the inner courtyard, Selene studies the structures around her with a sharpened awareness. Everything here is designed for permanence. Nothing exists for comfort. The stonework lacks beauty, but it endures. Sparta does not build to please. It builds to last. The same principle governs people. Those who fit the structure are preserved. Those who do not are corrected, reassigned, or removed from consideration entirely. When a Spartan woman approaches and signals for her to follow, Selene rises at once. She has already learned the most important law of this place. Hesitation is disappearance. As she walks, she makes a decision so slight it barely qualifies as thought. Sparta may command her body, her time, her immediate future, but it will not fully occupy her mind. That fragile resolve, unspoken, unnamed, becomes her first act of defiance. To understand what is about to happen to Selene, it is necessary to step backward. Long before she ever stood in this courtyard, Sparta was not an aberration. It became one through layers of decisions made under pressure, justified by fear, refined by generations who learned to exist without alternatives. Centuries earlier, Sparta seized fertile land it could not fully control. The subdued population was numerous, resilient, impossible to assimilate. They lived alongside their conquerors, working the fields, retaining memory and resentment. From this reality, Sparta learned its defining lesson. Survival would require control, not negotiation, not persuasion. Control. That necessity reshaped every aspect of life. Childhood ceased to be protected space and became preparation. The family yielded to the collective. Attachment became risk. Anything that did not reinforce dominance was diminished or eliminated. The body no longer belonged to the individual. It became an asset administered by the state, not through personal cruelty, but through systemic logic. Over time, that logic was praised as virtue. Spartans were trained not to doubt, not to ask, not to require explanation. Doubt was seen as a fracture through which disorder could enter. Reflection was replaced by ritual. Ritual hardened into habit, and once a practice becomes habit, it ceases to appear cruel. It simply exists. Celine, seated now on the stone bench, is the outcome of this progression. She is not despised. She is not punished for being an enemy. She is absorbed into an ancient calculation that determines who serves, how they serve, and for how long. She does not yet grasp every component of this system, but she feels its gravity in the way she is observed, in the exactness of her movements, in the complete absence of explanation. The training Sparta imposed on its children aimed at more than physical strength. It sought minds that did not waver. From early childhood, obedience was taught without justification, endurance without complaint. This was not framed as punishment. It was conditioning. Each deprivation, each trial was designed to erase a particular response. Over time, this produced men who required no explicit commands. They understood expectation because the system had replaced morality itself. They no longer distinguished between allowed and forbidden. They distinguished between useful and useless. Everything else was irrelevant, and in the shadow of that training existed a final stage, reserved for those who had proven they could act without internal resistance. It was never described openly, only referenced through softened language, as if naming it directly might fracture the order it sustained. A place where obedience reached completion, where actions occurred without witnesses, without questions. Molina does not know its full shape, but she feels it the way one feels a storm before it breaks, an invisible pressure pressing inward. At night, the women whisper, not stories in full, only fragments. Hints, unverified accounts passed hand to hand in darkness. In Sparta, fear does not require confirmation. Possibility alone is sufficient. From the outside, the city appears composed, disciplined, orderly, restrained. But beneath that surface, tension never dissolves. It accumulates. Sparta survives because every person accepts their assigned function. Molina begins to understand that the men formed by the city are not individual monsters. They are the predictable result of a system that removed doubt as a survival trait. They have learned to separate feeling from action, to act without reflection, to obey without hesitation. And it is these men who determine the futures of those who fall into Spartan control, not from cruelty, not from desire, but from routine, from adherence to a structure that tolerates no deviation. As she watches them move through the courtyard, Molina reaches an unsettling conclusion. Defiance alone will not save her. Survival here requires comprehension. She must learn the system well enough to anticipate it. She must learn to think as Sparta thinks, without allowing it to consume her entirely. The woman who enters the room does not present herself as a guard or a caretaker. She positions herself as an intermediary. She is young, powerfully built. Her posture reflects years of discipline training. Molina recognizes the form immediately. It is not incidental. It is the outcome of a culture that prizes endurance above all else. My name is Gorgo, the woman says. She offers no reassurance, only information. In Sparta, that is the closest equivalent to courtesy. Gorgo explains the situation in brief, measured phrases. The assessments are complete. The symbols on the tablets have been reviewed. Molina has been designated suitable for domestic placement, not as an equal, not as a guest, but as part of a secondary household arrangement meant to fulfill a defined function of the state. Molina listens without interruption. She understands that every sentence has been standardized, transmitted from woman to woman across generations. One thing is unmistakable. This is not a reward. It is a classification. Other outcomes exist for those who do not meet the criteria. Gorgo does not describe them. She does not need to. The silence surrounding those alternatives carries sufficient weight. In Sparta, what is left unnamed is often what is most feared. If you cooperate, you will live, Gorgo states plainly. If you do not, you will be reassigned. There is no menace in her voice, only fact. Molina understands that to Gorgo, this is honesty. No promises, no regret. In that moment, Molina realizes something deeply unsettling. Spartan women do not perceive themselves as victims, nor do they view themselves as oppressors. They understand themselves as necessary. When Gorgos stand to leave, she offers one final sentence. Tomorrow you will learn your fate. Nothing more is required. Molina is left alone, fully aware that her future now depends on an administrative decision made by people she will never see. The man waiting in the courtyard does not shift when she approaches. His stillness is not passive, it is attentive. He is no longer young, but his body retains a density of sustained training. His expression holds neither curiosity nor impatience, only assessment. His name is Cleomenes. She does not speak it. She knows it from the way Spartan women adjust themselves in his presence, from the subtle recalibration that follows men accustomed to authority that does not announce itself. He is a full citizen, someone who has endured every stage of the system and emerged intact. In Sparta, that alone grants power. Cleomenes speaks without warmth. He makes no reference to feeling or expectation. He speaks instead of continuity, inheritance, household stability. Molina answers carefully. She avoids submission. She avoids defiance. She has learned that extremes attract scrutiny. Her replies are plain, unembellished, shaped to mirror Spartan restraint. The adjustment is noticed. Cleomenes inclines his head just slightly. In Sparta, even the smallest gesture carries meaning. In the days that follow, Molina begins to recognize a pattern. The nights are predictable, mechanical. The days are not. Cleomenes returns at irregular intervals. He sits in the courtyard and speaks not of emotion, but of strategy, harvest cycles, and the martial versus Sparta allows itself as poetry. At first, Molina listens in silence. Then, cautiously, she begins to ask questions, not challenges, but clarifications. Practical concerns. Apparent inconsistencies framed as logistical details. Cleomenes responds stiffly at first. Then something shifts. Interest. Speaking with her does not require the rigid mask he wears among other men. Cleomenes is surrounded by equals, yet constrained by them. Molina, by contrast, does not count. She is foreign. She is classified as property. And because of that, paradoxically, she is safe. That safety, she begins to realize, is dangerous. Each exchange adds mass to a connection the system never accounted for. Leonidas lingers longer than before, listens with greater attention, answers with more than rehearsed responses. It is not affection. Not yet. It is recognition. And in Sparta, acknowledging another's humanity is the first quiet step toward violation of the order. Marina is not foolish. She knows Leonidas will never openly defy the structure that forged him, but she also understands she has encountered something rare, a man trained to extinguish feeling, beginning, slowly, to remember how to think. That memory, fragile and restrained, could become either a danger or a lever. The summons comes without notice. Two men escort Marina through streets she already knows, not through familiarity, but through repetition. Sparta does not evolve. That is both its promise and its menace. As they pass, women pause in their work. They look, they assess. No one asks where Marina is being taken. In this city, questions themselves signal resistance. The chamber where the efforts wait is stark even by Spartan measure. No symbols, no ornament. 5 seats form a shallow arc, one placed opposite them for those required to respond. Marina sits when directed. Her spine remains straight, her face composed. She has learned that visible fear is information freely given. The efforts speak as they would on any civic matter. Time, they note, is advancing. Expected outcomes have yet to appear. Their tone carries no reprimand, only calculation. Then they mention a request. A name Marina has already heard murmured in darkness, always quietly, always followed by silence. Lysandros. They do not explain who he is. They do not need to. The weight of the name conveys its significance. The request, they explain, is irregular. It does not guarantee continuity. It does not ensure stability. It introduces risk to what the city currently values in her. And yet, it carries backing. They do not frame this as coercion. They present it as an administrative complication. Granting the request carries a cost. Refusing it carries another. For the first time since entering Sparta, Marina is offered what they call a choice. Accept and assume the consequences. Decline and accelerate the demands of her present assignment. This is not an ethical decision. It is a reassignment of responsibility. Whatever follows, the city remains unaccountable. Marina sees a design immediately. There is no true choice. Both paths lead to loss, only by different routes. But she also recognizes something else. The fact that she has been consulted at all signals a shift. She is no longer entirely disposable, not secure, but no longer unseen. She answers calmly. She chooses to remain where she is. She selects the path she understands, however constricted it may be. The ephors nod, as if her response confirms an expectation. They remind her that time continues, that the city observes. Then she is dismissed. No ceremony, no closing words. That night, when Marina returns to Leonidas' house, she knows the margin for error has narrowed. Survival no longer depends solely on obedience or even comprehension. It now depends on foresight. For the first time, she begins to consider not merely enduring the system, but altering its balance, even if the cost is transformation beyond anything she once imagined. Leonidas' house offers no refuge. When he enters that evening, Marina notices a change immediately. Not fatigue, not anger, unease. He had been informed, not of everything, but enough to understand that the equilibrium they reached is unstable. They speak little. The silence between them bears more weight than words. Finally, Leonidas says what neither can avoid. The margin has tightened. The city does not wait indefinitely. Every assignment must justify its existence. Marina listens without interruption. Passivity is no longer an option. Not now. That night, for the first time since arriving in Sparta, she acts differently, not in submission, but in deliberate participation. She does not attempt a seat. She accelerates what the city already demands. She understands with ruthless clarity that her body has become her argument, and delaying that argument would mean surrender. The days that follow compress into a monitored routine. Consultations, adjustments, recommendations delivered as technical instruction. Marina follows each with precision, not from blind compliance, but because she understands that every action is evidence. Meanwhile, Leonidas begins to change in ways others notice. He is more present, more attentive, not only within the household, but publicly. He defends his investment using the language the system respects. Efficiency, allocation, future yield. He does not speak of Marina as a person. He speaks of her as an asset. The protection is incomplete, but it exists. Marina registers every shift with care. Each defense adds a layer of safety and draws another measure of attention. As the pressure intensifies, Molina reaches a conclusion that transforms fear into purpose. Survival will not be secured through obedience alone. It will come from cultivating reliance. Being useful once is insufficient. She must become necessary. While the city waits for outcomes, Molina's thoughts extend beyond the immediate moment. She no longer sees the future as a fixed endpoint, but as a progression of calculated steps, where each choice determines not only whether she survives, but the terms on which she does. Sparta believes it has reduced her to a role. Molina begins to recognize that even within that reduction there exists a narrow margin, almost imperceptible, yet real. She chooses to claim that space, not through overt resistance, but through intentional endurance. Because in a city that transforms people into components, conformity does not always equal defeat. Sometimes it is preparation, waiting for a precise instant when a single misaligned piece is enough to stop the entire mechanism.